Hello everyone, my name is Asonye and I'm doing this presentation with Dr. Asonye. The title of our presentation today is Emergent Literacy in Deaf Children in Nigeria, the Need to Develop Indigenous Sign Languages. It has been established that early exposure to language of immediate environment, whether signed or spoken, including print media, gives rise to an unconventional early literacy behaviors that build a foundational knowledge known as emergent literacy. This paper discusses the pathway to emergent literacy and gifted for deaf children in Nigeria through early exposure to indigenous signed languages. This study is based on the theoretical framework of child language acquisition and early intervention program for deaf children. Data discussed in this work is derived from the ongoing Indigenous Nigerian Sign Language Documentation Project of Save the Deaf and Endangered Languages Initiative, SDELI. We would like to establish the concept of emergent literacy by looking at some scholars' definition of emergent literacy. Tell and Salisbury, 1986, defined emergent literacy as those literacy skills, reading and writing, that children exhibit prior to the conventional literacy stage. It is those behaviors of reading and writing that lead to conventional literacy and comprises all of the actions, understanding, and misunderstandings of learners engaged in experiences that involve print creation or use. Koppenheimer and Erickson, 2003. So, emergent literacy emphasizes on child's exposure to language and literacy content at the earliest stage. This infograph demonstrates the continuum of emergent literacy development, and this starts with a caregiver, whereby the caregiver helps to expose the child to literacy behaviors through modeling and providing literacy-friendly environment to the child. And looking at this diagram, it shows that the child starts learning from the caregiver from birth to 1 year, and it rose to the second, third, fourth, and fifth year. And this helps the child to become a skilled reader later in life. This is another infographics, and the diagram here demonstrates a strong and consistent relationship between emergent literacy skills, supportive early learning environment, and the eventual development of literacy skills. And this starts from the child talking or signing to the caregiver, who is now the intentional caregiver, and helps the child to start learning how to read and write. And the earlier the child starts this, the better. Up to the preschool and eventually to the skilled reader's experience. Emergent literacy skill helps level the playing field, and it is the key component here is early exposure to language. It is important to note that children with emergent literacy exposure often emerge as gifted. Here is another infographic that shows the emergent literacy knowledge areas. And the first knowledge area here is the oral language. This is whereby the child has the ability to understand the use of language through listening, speaking, and acquiring of new vocabulary. Another literacy knowledge area is the print awareness. Here is the child's understanding of the functions of printed symbols like letters, words, pictures, and of printed text and how it relates to meaning. So the relationship between the print and the meaning. The next is the book knowledge. And in the book knowledge, the child is able to understand what the book is and how it is, to be used or read. So that brings us to the next knowledge area, which is the alphabet knowledge. And this is the child's ability to identify and say the names of letters in an alphabet. And this skill paves the way for phonological awareness, which is the child's ability to identify and manipulate sounds and the understanding that sounds and letters are combined to make words.
So the one question that we want to ask in this presentation is, how can a Nigerian deaf child achieve emergent literacy? And in this study, and also in some of our previous studies, we have proposed three conditions to achieve full cognitive and linguistic skills and perhaps emergent literacy. And these three conditions are interrelated, one of which is immediate language, or sometimes we call it language of immediate environment, immediate family, just like we saw on the infographics, that the parent plays a role. So the role of a caregiver is very important, and also early intervention program. And for the deaf child, the early intervention program is a very strong key component. And also for any child that has some form of neurodevelopmental disability. Now, we want to look at language as a primary component, which our work today is more concerned with than the others. So looking at language, we propose that the language must be indigenous, language must be a mother tongue, and for a deaf child, it has to be a sign language. The sign language is the mother tongue of a child, even when the child is not born by deaf parents, which is most times the case. Sign language is still the mother tongue of the deaf children. And lastly, language has to be accessible. If the language is not accessible, like in the case of many deaf children in Nigeria, according to our studies, there is going to be difficulty in reaching the needed cognitive and linguistic skills that for a deaf child to attain emergent literacy. Our work today is built on the theoretical framework that has been studied by many scholars, including our own works, which borders on early intervention and early acquisition of a natural language, a natural indigenous language. For the deaf child, it has to be signed, and this is the condition that provides a fundamental platform for full linguistic and cognitive proficiency. However, we look at this problem in our discussion today, and this problem is found in the question what we earlier asked: how can a Nigerian deaf child achieve emergent literacy? So in this case, we tend to ask again, how does a Nigerian deaf child achieve emergent literacy when most deaf children are parented by hearing individuals who have no sign language knowledge at all? How can a Nigerian deaf child achieve emergent literacy when the existing indigenous sign languages in some rural communities are endangered for lack of use? How can this happen even when the national deaf community is directly or indirectly promoting the foreign and foreign-based sign languages over the indigenous ones? I think this is kind of a food for thought, but very important questions that our work, seems to be asking. However, we kind of propose a solution, and it's just a one-way traffic solution, which is language documentation. In this case, the Indigenous Nigerian Sign Language Documentation Project, which has been hosted and carried out by SLA for the past 6 years. That is a solution we are proposing, and we believe that this is possible as we have been very active in documenting and developing the sign language varieties that are existing in Nigeria. That today we are talking about developing Indigenous Nigerian Sign Language app, and we want to show you some videos that have come out of the work that we've been doing for the past 6 years, which are really speaking to our presentations today. But before we do that, we want to say that our documentation has always been in accordance with the standard of the WFD. WFD is the World Federation of the Deaf, and it believes that any sign language work should reflect all the different signs used by a language community. Therefore, sign language dictionary work should always document all the different signs and their variations that deaf people in a community use or in an area. And we believe that Nigeria is very central to this proposal because Nigeria is a multilingual country, both spoken and signed. And to the extent that people wonder that Nigeria has as much sign language varieties as it has spoken language varieties, and wonder how we are able to document all these varieties. But I mean, it has been something that we believe is very possible. So the WFD advises that you do not pick only one sign for one word. There should be room for varieties whenever you are documenting sign languages. And so the WFD does not support any formal standardization activity related to any sign language, but it supports appropriately qualified linguistic research into the documentation of all sign languages in the world. All right, so here's some of our videos. All right, so I have another video to show. Okay, I hope you enjoyed our video. So by way of conclusion, we argue in this work today that with early exposure to indigenous sign languages, deaf infants in Nigeria and any other country or any other deaf community would have equal potential and cognitive skills that qualify them as emergent literacy learners and later gifted. Therefore, we urge indigenous linguists, deaf individuals, sign language interpreters, deaf families, and every other persons that are in deaf communities to support the ongoing documentation of indigenous sign language or sign languages of African countries, which we have started with Nigerian deaf community, and to give the deaf children equal gifted opportunity with their hearing peers. And we are glad that you listened to our presentation. Thank you.